George is the latest every day.
You actually. I actually started.
She's not. She's not. And the first few mornings we went through exit 17 when they turned it.
I do not know. Teddy's a little. Okay. We ready to come to order? Okay, welcome everybody. I'd like to call our April 26th work session to order. So we were going to start out with the roll call by Ms. Kingsley.
Mr. Austin.
Present.
Ms. Quetch. Here. Mr. Webb.
Here.
Mr. Anderson.
Here.
And Mayor Pillion.
Here. Okay, now we have the Pledge of Allegiance led by our Councilmember Wayne Austin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item on our agenda is the approval of today's agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
So the motion was made by Mr. Austin and seconded by Vice Mayor Anderson. Do we have any discussion? If there's no discussion, will you please
Do you
call?
not want to amend it, or you did?
Oh, yeah, we're gonna amend to go into a closed session?
Yes, okay. So we need a motion then?
We have a motion and a second on the table.
So how do we handle that in correct procedure?
Mr. Austin needs to amend his motion.
Okay.
Unless he
Okay.
wants to
I will
withdraw it.
I will move to amend my motion to allow for a closed session for purposes of discussing salary.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so an amended motion has been made by Mr. Austin and a second by Ms. Webb. Is there any discussion?
This way.
Ms. Quetch. Okay, sorry. So sorry.
Flattered,
I did not mean to attach you to, sorry.
That's okay.
Do we have any discussion? If there's no discussion, Kim, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
All right.
And Mayor Pillion.
Aye. Okay, so are we going to go into closed session before or after public comments? What is the pleasure of the council?
Let's
Before?
just do it.
Okay.
Okay, I move to go into closed session pursuant to Virginia Code 2-2-3711A1 for discussion and consideration of salaries of all appointees and employees of the town.
Okay. So are we going to move next door? We'll be back in a few
We
minutes.
need a
Gotta
second and a vote.
Oh, we need a second, sorry, and a vote.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Quetch, a second by Vice Mayor Anderson. Is there any discussion from the council? If there is no discussion, Kim, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
And Mayor Pillion.
Aye. Okay, so we are now in closed session. Who is going to read us back into you? Thank you.
I would make a motion to reconvene.
I'll second that.
So a motion to reconvene into open session was made by Mr. Webb, seconded by Vice Mayor Anderson. Do we have any discussion? If there is no discussion, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
And Mayor Pillion.
Aye.
And then I need to do the certification thingy, right, Kim?
Yes.
All right. I move that the town council certify that in the enclosed session just concluded, nothing was discussed except the matter or matters specifically identified in the motion to convene in closed session and lawfully permitted to be discussed under the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act cited in that motion.
Mr. Austin, do you so certify?
I do.
Ms. Quetch.
I so certify.
Mr. Webb.
I so certify.
Mr. Anderson.
I so certify.
And Mayor Webb. Mayor Pillion, I'm so sorry. I keep saying that today.
That's okay, I called her.
Apologize.
I so certify. Webb is the word of the day.
There's a lot of webs in here.
Okay, moving on. Moving on. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment?
No public comment.
No public comments today. We have no proclamations. We do not have a public hearing. We have no resolutions, no first readings or second readings of ordinances, no considerations of bids, no new business, and no old business. So despite the fact that you all had to be patient and wait on us for quite a while, we're zooming through the agenda. What we do have is some communication from the town manager. And first of all, we have a summary about the presentation from Emory and Henry students regarding the available parking study. I know, I think they did.
Oh, did it really?
They probably had to go back to class.
I'm sorry about that.
Oh, wow.
They have exams today.
Oh, no.
They
Oh.
left.
Well, we should have put them to the front of the agenda if we had known. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. So we'll just go through the presentation and tell you guys what they did. So today you'll hear from Gabe and you are going to hear from Nick, about, how they handled the parking study, and we're calling it a kickoff summary because we do think that when you hear the end of this, you'll probably say, we might need more information, we might need more, studying. I put down that you'd hear from the Emory Henry students, and their professor, but they had to leave. So, this is just a brief synopsis of parking in the Abingdon downtown, and there will be more work to do. So the real question that we tried to analyze with them is how is public parking utilized? And as we all know, community development and our zoning ordinances is where the requirements for parking come from. One of the questions that's been posed for some time is there enough parking for commercial and residential redevelopment endeavors in the downtown? And is there enough parking, if there is enough parking, is it being utilized to its full potential? So that's how we went into this project. The real question that has been on everybody's mind as we see the project moving forward is the courthouse project. As a government, the county courthouse project requested that the review of that project be under their purview. So the college can make that type of request, government can make that type of request. So the only review that the town of Abingdon had with this project was through the HPRB review. So the HPRB looked at what the exterior was, but there wasn't an additional review of the site plan. There wasn't a statement of, if you provide more development, you've got to provide more parking. That was not part of the analysis. When we look at previous studies and the history of parking, and we even just got some additional data today, in 1999, Thompson and Litton did a study, and I think we would say that those studies that were done were really focused on adding more parking to the downtown. That was really what they said. And that's original 1999 study said that they thought that they needed 150 to 300 additional spaces. Using that study in 2001, they looked at 4 locations for parking garages. And so those two studies together really were focused entirely on building a parking garage. I mean, that was what they were pushing for. RK&K in 2019 did an additional study, and a little bit about what you'll hear today is that instead of looking at really this idea of building a parking garage, instead it said, how much parking do we have? How many parking lots do we have that aren't actually being used? And in that study, it found that even if you added surface parking or allowed parking to be in certain private parking lots, within 4 parking locations, you could gain up to 130 parking spaces. So you'll hear about that probably specifically from Nick about the parking lots that we have throughout the area that are currently vacant most of the days, and some solutions for that as well. In that 2019 numbers, parking garage was estimated of being at a minimum of $11 million to build. So when you think about identifying parking spaces that maybe we can work with, local entities, or looking at 2019 numbers of $11 million, which Mike Surratt would probably tell me to add a 30% increase to that based on how all of our bids are coming in just for sidewalks and any type of infrastructure. So, the inventory of public parking since, 1999 when it was looked at, I mean, that really hasn't changed in 22 years. I mean, we haven't really gained public parking. We haven't also really seen a lot of new buildings. And usually those two things are where you see more parking because you get new development. What we are seeing though is the redevelopment of buildings. And, the question really is, are the uses changing? Are there uses that now require more parking than previous uses? So we are going to hear more about the project, not from the students, but we think that in reviewing a lot of this, that our topography and the walkability of our community and the wayfinding is really what's hindering people from using parking, further away from the courthouse. We did look further than that. We said, well, while the kids are out getting, students, while they're out getting additional data, let's look at the entire downtown. We're not really going to talk to you about that today, but we did look at parking all the way to Rexburg and the entire downtown as well. So this is a little more focused on the courthouse. So how we hooked up with Professor Edwards, 3 years ago, he did a study with one of his students about the urban heat islands. And out of that study, he presented last year, he said to me that there was a grant for trees because that student's information said we needed more trees. And so if you all remember the big grant that Kevin Sigmund and Rick spearheaded, that came from his students doing a project, them getting a grant, basically hooking us up with the grant and then us getting all those trees. So again, talked to him and said, hey, a real life project is hard to get when you're a college kid. By the time you get out, unless you've got some internships, you just know what the books tell you. So we worked with the students and gave them a real life project, and I guess real life got in the way today for them as well. But Gabe's going to talk about how we worked with the students and what we did, and then I think they're going to talk a little bit about what we found since the students are not here.
So yeah, first thing we did was we brought them into the office, went over the idea with them, kind of went over their route. Pretty much just general idea for the project scope of it was Tanner Street was your kind of eastern boundary, Russell Road was the western, and Park Street was kind of like your southern boundary almost, and then all the streets in between. And so what we had them do was take a video of, in the car, you would go up and take a video of how many cars were there. This way you could have photographic evidence in a way. And then you would also have a sheet where you could mark off how many cars were like on Main Street, Valley Street, and so on, Church. And there was only 2 streets that we did like a double pass by, that was Main and Valley, just because they are a little bit busier. So this way, if you miss something on one side because there's either somebody's unloading something for supplies for a restaurant or something, you wouldn't miss it. So we did a double pass by those. So they collected that data, and it was for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for one week, and it was at 9 a.m., 3 p.m., 6 p.m. So the point of that was to see work hours in the morning, kind of afternoonish, and then when everybody's heading back home. And so they gathered that data, they did some analysis of that, and Nick will touch on other numbers, but I can go over some observations that we saw as we were collecting some data too at 9 a.m. for the students, given that they had some classes during that day. Main Street was pretty much always the busiest one. That was pretty much where all the parking was. There were some spots more on the eastern end when you're getting towards like Campesinos and Rain, where it kind of plateaued out. Valley Street was pretty much empty for most of the time. There was maybe a car here, a car there in front of the residence, but other than that, completely empty. And from the data that we'll go over later on, that's pretty much showed true for the whole week for each day. Other than that, all the other streets though were still pretty much empty. There was like a smattering of cars here and there for the residents. I'm guessing if somebody works from home, that's probably what's their car and they have the driveway. Other than that, it's pretty much a low rate of usage, I would say. And Nick will go over more on the numbers in a sense, but overall, only 22% of parking within our project area of pretty much downtown Abingdon has been utilized. So that's where we were coming through with maybe just signage directing people to striping would help visitors and maybe residents that are new would know where to park or what's public parking in a sense.
Should be going through the slides for you, because I think you just went through all of them. So we're good.
So parking lots, there's 3 that I would focus on that are being underutilized, that are private at the moment. Actually, I think one might be public. Sinking Springs Church, Barter Stage 2 parking lot, and then I think it's the municipal lot with the farmers market. Combined, those hold about 200 spaces that are not being utilized. And I think, it would be a good idea to probably put together a plan to figure out how to get the most out of those lots, maybe, rent them out or something like that. Because there's a lot of space there that is not being used right now. But those are probably the 3 main lots because they're in 3 different hotspots throughout town. Downtown, Barter, and then farmers market. So, but yeah, I'll focus on those 3.
So we'll just kind of skip through all the things that the kids were gonna hit on here, but they talked a little bit about what they researched. This was the overall route, so you can see that they basically, we went and looked at the entire area of what we consider either the historic downtown or our main downtown. Also looked down at Remsburg and the area there. Let's see. This is so Nick did this work where he took each of these segments of the street, so like Northport Street, you can see these red X's. We counted each one of the parking spaces, so that when they went out and took the data, they were seeing, yes, a car was in that space, or no, a car was not in that space. So it was a very, specific thing that Nick and Gabe had them come out, had them do all of these times. Main Street is divided into sections, so obviously a person's not gonna park in front of here and go to the courthouse. So we did also look at those sections, things like North Church Street, Oak Hill Street, Park Street, and then the kids said here, which Gabe already hit on, that they did a 9 a.m., a 3 p.m., and a 6 p.m. And again, just to try to say when is important session, when is the afternoon time, and then dinner time. So this is what the data looked like that they collected. So you can see they had the roadway sections, they collected the marked spaces, and the marked spaces were where they had a parking space and then the total spot. So for example, 9 a.m., Tanner had 0, there was 0 parking out of the 45 spots available. Northport, which is probably the most, intensively used area, you see Northport had 15 of the 22 spaces filled. So they have this data, which they have put into a report for all of the time that was collected. And again, what was, what Gabe said is only 22% of the spaces were actually being used. So It's a pretty low percentage, for the amount of parking that we have. And I like to put this graphic in just to sort of say, you know, if you'll go and park out at the edge of Walmart and walk all the way back to get your milk, 725 feet. I also put 725 feet here on the corner of where the courthouse is to where you would walk. So we do realize that topography is probably our biggest issue with people walking and parking in different places. But it's a pretty good distance. There's quite a bit of parking. People don't seem to like to park across Valley up by, you know, KVAP, but, you know, it's really the distance from that to go to the coffee shop is truly not that much different. So the 1999 RK&K report that we actually just got today showed us that is similar to what they did. They basically identified the different parking lots that exist and then how far the distance was. And I think the farthest distance that they chose in that study was 890 feet. So there really is a lot of parking in a very short amount of space. So what's the future for parking? I think that one thing we have talked about is doing studies during the summer and the fall to really capture the tourism, to see if that changes how the parking's used. Another key thing that we think would be a really advantageous thing to do is promote and encourage these parking lot private owners to put in paid parking. Similar to how we're seeing more and more EV parking stations. You know, it's a QR code, they get paid to park, and then as we work on this directional signage plan that we have a consultant hired to do, we would be able to then direct people to parking. So you would have basically private lots, and my example is that a couple summers ago when I lived out west, I went to Portland, and a church when I looked at the website to see what was the safest spot to park, it was a church parking lot that had like a 2-layer parking garage. So drove in there, parked my car for $30 a day. It was not broken into. Spent my entire, my 4 days there. Actually interviewed for this job on vacation, and it worked out. And it's a win-win because we get public parking and they make money for their facilities and their services. So I think that's really the future. I don't know how many of you've been to Boone lately, but every single space is paid parking. And it's not the old-timey coins where somebody has to go and collect them. I mean, it's our modern version of a QR code, and it's a service. So we would have liked to have you all hear from the students, but that's the gist of what they did. If you have any questions, we can answer them. I think that they started something that we probably will want to talk about in the future, maybe in the infrastructure committee meeting, and see where we go.
And the one point we've got coming, and Mike can comment where we're at, but with the Valley Street traffic calming, one of the things we're doing is delineating the parking spots. Because when people drive down and if you know the area, then you'll know where to park. But without lines, your car gets hit, and that happens, and then they don't know where to park. So if you see the lines, then they know they can park there, and I think that will also help slow the traffic down because it visually narrows the roadway. Because we drove it, and if you're back by KVAT, shoot, I mean that's a real short walk to the courthouse. It's not that far at all. So I mean it's not as far as the Walmart walk, but yeah, with the signage. That'll be good. Like I was at Roanoke, I went over there and they have these public lots and it's similar signage, and you go and you hit the little thing and you pay and you park, and it's someone else's lot, it's not a municipal lot. But that way, I think right now, the Pecan Street restaurant rents spots from the church for one of their lots for that kind of the same reason.
And doesn't Sinking Springs Presbyterian rent their church right now to the courthouse
They do.
while they're under construction?
Yeah.
County,
Right. So, I mean, I think that's, because right now we've got plenty of spots, unless it's Sunday morning or Wednesday evening, there's plenty of spots, and so.
There might be some way we get with the 3 parking lots that they had, with the transit system. I don't know if there'd be some way you could maybe set something up to where every 10 minutes, I mean, it would cost you to ride the transit, but every 10 minutes, like the 3 parking lots that they keyed out on here, seemed like if you had something set up to where the transit system from 8 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock in the evening periodically stopped every 10 to 15 minutes, maybe somebody wouldn't have to walk, you know. if-
Or
if
put the
they-
number on the sign for links and they could come get them.
Or just like
Yeah.
that with that, or you can, boom, it's almost like making a phone call or sending a text, like, boom, I'm at, the barter stage parking lot, 3
If you're
people.
going to the courthouse specifically, you could make that appointment, because you're probably going there for
Yeah.
a situation.
Yep.
So here, and again, this is just one of the days that was collected, at the bottom, 4 up from the bottom, the barter stage 2 parking lot, 118 spaces right across the street here, 2 of them had a parking space in it, and that was 2, 1, and 1. So there's 118 spaces right at the center of where, you know, visitors would come into our community and
Yes.
walk either direction, and it's completely not being used.
You could even
And
park there and walk to the creeper
Right.
trail, I assume,
Yep.
too. So, I mean,
Right.
it's,
So the United Methodist parking was the other one, that one was used a little bit more.
I'm
And then
wondering if there
Sinking-
was church circle that morning.
It might have been, and then the Sinking Springs again, that is being, rented out to the county, but 12 out of 48. So, I mean, again, I think that we're here, like 2019, studies seem to say that same thing, that's what they have continued to find, so it's
Well,
just information.
One thing to keep in mind too is, during the construction, they've got a lot of the courthouse parking lot itself blocked. And there was some discussion when they were designing the courthouse that they were gonna have to take a lot of that, and they're not going to. So when the construction is finished, there'll be 30 or 40 extra spaces just in that lot as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think most of you all know now, but for anyone listening, that was the decision that we made there on 4th Street in front of the coffee shop was, first it was, they wanted to take all the parking spaces, and so then, everybody worked together to come up with a solution where instead you still allowed parking, but we changed it to one way during the construction time. So again, that'll open back up as well. So that's just, food for thought, and that's the project that we worked on this semester, and I just, in general, I think it's good to have students do these types of things, because it gets them out, and maybe next time they'll stay and attend.
Is it possible for you to send us their email addresses so that we could
Yes.
possibly thank them
Yes,
for their work,
absolutely.
since we didn't get to do it in person?
Yes.
Okay,
100%.
thank
Yeah,
you.
and then the going rate was about 40,000 per spot is what it cost on the construction of a parking garage, is still a rough number, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a huge number. If you want a 200 spot, you gotta acquire the land. It's big numbers, and so I think by making a couple adjustments on our end, it'll make it easier for everybody. And and I'm sure Mr. Austin's been to other courthouses, but you don't always get to park right out front. I mean, it's usually a park and walk, so it's usually a pretty decent walk. I mean, you go down to Charleston, South Carolina, and there's parking garages, you'll pay for it, and it's still 20 minutes to get to the courthouse. So it's,
And, I do know that we had one project that kind of came in but didn't really pan out to be a real project, and there was some interest in putting parking on the lower level as you go down on the south side of Court, and put a multi-tiered parking garage with, some sort of a mixed use above that. And again, somebody could definitely do that, so if there was a commercial developer or somebody who wanted to do a mixed use project, the topography really does lend itself to that, to having parking on the lower and walk in at, street level. So there's a lot of opportunity and options, but, this is what we found out of this study.
thank you.
Thank you, great work.
thank you all for the work.
Okay, the next item, thank you guys. The next item on the agenda is the discussion regarding a proposed policy regarding banner poles. So we're going to hear from our town manager.
Sure. I had them printed, so you'll see in your, should be somewhere, yeah, right there. What it is, I went through our existing documents that we've had from years ago, and then crafted some from other jurisdictions. Basically, there's in my research, you have 3 different types. You've got banner poles, which are like the light poles with the little flags on them on Main Street, and then you've got the over the roads that are not attached to poles. They're basically like cables that attach to 2 buildings, and then you've got what we what we used to have on Cumming Street, which would be the actual poles with the span that goes across the roadway. And so for the purposes of this discussion, this was specifically for the location on Cumming Street, because we have one of the poles currently. The other one of the 2, one was cut in half or cut to the point where it can't be reused. And so But for the engineering purposes and all, I mean, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a steel pole?
Yes, sir.
And it was engineered for a certain wind load, because it's like a 35-foot wide banner, which has a fairly high amount of wind that will catch it. So it's a steel pole, and so we have the quote was $5,500 to replace the other pole. So the one we still have to match the other one. And then we would have to put the little cables or whatever mechanism it would to hook it together. So for this one, like currently, if we were to go in and rent the spot, like make it available for third parties that weren't related to town business, then it would require a zoning change because our zoning allows town signage, but doesn't allow third-party signage. Is that not right? So for this policy, what the objective was to come up with something that would allow us to replace the sign that was there, or largely replace the sign that was there. I know in the past, it was used sometimes for third-party advertisements, but with the zoning changes, and, this is something, if this is the will of council, this is something we could implement relatively soon, versus if you had to go through a zoning change and all, it would just add time to it and add a little more complexity. But so for this, the idea really is that if we put the things up, it would be for town-sponsored events. So like we sponsor like the Highlands Festival, and if we're gonna have, it's not banjo.
Fiddler's
Convention. I knew it was a stringed instrument they play in the country. So I was pretty close. So, yeah, the Fiddler's Convention, and so I was originally looking at things that are just town events, but that's a town event, even though it's not in the town. So it's limited, so things that we as a town sponsor, and we have certain events that we do sponsor, and so, yeah, we have a car show coming up. If you want to advertise the car show, it would be with set parameters that would allow it to make it so that it was just saying things that we as a town endorse, or we as a town want to help promote for, basically for the tourism business. And it's not set for, if you had one business that's got a big fire sale, that's not what it's for. It's just to promote events that are for the good of the town on a bigger picture like that. And I think, there's some time parameters on there, so you don't have things up there for a month at a time, because they'll wind up getting tattered. And my understanding is we still have some of our old banners. Is that right, Mike?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we still have some of our old banners, so some of those we'd have to recreate the ones that we currently have. And the specifications, like my understanding, I had met with a resident when I first got here about the banner poles. And the property that we no longer own, my understanding is that we could get an easement for that. And if we could get an easement for that without any great amount of labor or expense, this would be something that we could implement relatively. What's the turnaround time on the pole?
It's probably about 60 days.
Yeah, so it'd be something we could put in place before it gets too long, and have it in and up and running before summer, I would imagine. And the whole idea is it's something that it would have to meet these criteria. And again, if it's, the one thing I did mention, I don't know if you all saw there was an email, I kind of explained what I've seen in other jurisdictions, which was kind of interesting, because like Austin, Texas, I've never been there, but I know they got tons of tourists. They actually have on their GIS, they have like 66 locations that you can rent a sign, and they have their traffic counts and how much it costs and all. But they also are very, very successful with tourism, and so, they've got it figured out. We obviously don't have 66 roads, much less 66 places to put a banner pole. But if we wanted to make it so that, like if you go to Lexington, I know not on their main drag, but one of the drags with the stores on it, they just have cables hooked to buildings, and they have signage there. And that way, if you got an event on that street or an event in that general area, it allows people to be aware. But I think it would have to be something that would be similarly regulated, so it's not like an adult entertainment business or something like that, things that would match what we're trying to promote as a community. So, but like I travel all over basically the 5-state area, all in a couple of hours of here. I mean, and pretty much every small charming town you go to has them, and it's just part of that small town America feel. I think the challenge really is to make sure that we don't, we don't unduly restrict it, have rules in place and follow the rules.
Yes, sir.
Is that fair? And I think we have the money in this year's budget that we're currently in. I mean, if we could do this whole thing for something less than 10,000, I would imagine. Yeah, so something that's doable. It's just a matter of whether or not y'all want to do. Chew on it for a while, or think about it, or.
I think that I'm all on the board right now with going ahead and putting that in motion and getting that ball rolling.
Are there any legalities that we need to consider?
Yes.
Okay. Would the best course of action be to, so the way I see it, we need two things. We need to consider the legalities and make sure we're covered on that front, first of all. So maybe Cam could review this and send us an email or write a memo, pros and cons, things we need to think about as far as this goes, and make sure that we're bulletproof in that area. And then the second thing is we need to determine somebody needs to determine if we can use the space or not.
Correct, yeah, and I think I can reach out to the person I spoke to see if we can make that happen, but my understanding it was pretty doable.
Yeah, so the way I see it is those two things need to happen, and then we can decide. I don't know, is there any discussion?
No, I agree with Mr. Anderson. I think this is something that I'm really a big proponent of and always have been. And I hear from a lot of the town residents that this is something that we need back, and many of them want back. Will never be, in your words, bulletproof legality-wise. There is no such thing.
Well, I'll defer to the
We can do the
attorneys in the
best we
room.
can do, and I'm sure Cam will do that for us, and I appreciate that, but we survived for many years without issues or problems, and as Mr. Cochran says, there are a lot of other towns in the areas that he travels to that have these banners, and so I'm confident that we can do well with legality-wise and the logistics of getting it done.
Okay.
Yeah, and like, this policy points back to like town-sponsored, town-sanctioned, so like, if we had an event that comes up mid-year and it's something that we want to buy into, then that's something I can present to y'all, and that way we could go forward with something like that. Because then the other one is that they'd reserve it in advance, so they could reserve it up to like a year in advance, so like we know every year we're gonna have this festival. And if there's a scenario where there's two competing ones, then we just gotta make a decision on that, but I think it's a workable policy that would, and I tried, from the analytics side, trying to figure out like, the Plum Alley. I looked at Plum Alley before and after, without banners, but they changed the number of booths so much, you couldn't get good data comparing the two. So I was trying to show quantitatively whether it would really mattered, but you can't really show it because the variables change too much, so.
Understood. Okay, so how shall we proceed? Shall we make sure, examine the legality, between now and the next meeting, examine the legalities and, just double check all of that and talk to the person who owns the property and see if we can arrange that, and then vote on the policy at the next meeting, if that all pans out?
Yeah, that's what we do.
Are we in agreement?
Well, the next meeting is in.
It's Monday.
Monday.
Yeah.
Monday. Well-
So next mid-month?
The next mid-month?
18th.
Unless it all falls together perfectly? Yes, the 18th?
Yeah.
Okay. So everyone's in favor of proceeding in that fashion?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that,
Yes, I mean, I don't wanna rush Cam or anyone else. I mean, I'd like to be able to consider that our next meeting, which is Monday.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be that hard to.
Yeah, I don't think
I
so.
don't know,
Okay, if we
I don't
can.
know, Cam. I don't know what you've got in front of you, Cam, but.
Nothing. I've got nothing to do in between now.
so if we can, we will.
Let's try to do it.
Sure.
And one of the reasons, I will not be here at the 18th, the meeting on the 18th, I'll be out of the country. So, I'd like to be able to do it next meeting if possible.
Okay.
Where you head to, Guatemala?
So you two have homework, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I understand that the third item on that section, we're going to move to Monday. Okay. Is there any other communications from the town manager?
No, it's a beautiful. weather.
Waterfall.
What was that?
Memorial
Oh,
Park.
yeah, so if you will have to notice, the waterfall is operational, the one in front of Veterans Memorial Park, and our staff's been killing it doing that. And if you haven't been out to the, because I know we have a lot of people viewing online, if you've been out to the meadows, the splash pad, it'll be opening on 2 PM on the 28th, Memorial Day weekend. But the brickwork is almost completely done, and that is brickwork original to the meadows. That's a lot of brick, and our staff's been out there killing it. But it looks awesome, and it really is gonna be a nice feature to add to the community. But it is, the key takeaway is it's brick from the meadows property that's original to it. And our staff really, they knocked it out of the park with that, so. And then the waterfall is pretty and operational, we're hoping that works good. And then the last part is, I met with staff out at the construction site for the DOT. And right now, the mess that is they're actively monitoring the traffic all the time. So you'll see trucks, and if you don't see them out there, they have a camera right on the interstate overhead, and that's looking down, and they're seeing it, so they're monitoring at their Bristol facility. But we met out on site, and there are some timing issues that they've been trying to adjust, and you can tell it if you sit in it every day. But once the right turn to get on the interstate opens up for people leaving town, that'll alleviate most all the problems, and that's about 2 months away. But they assure us, one, they know it's a problem, and they're doing everything they can to try to help mitigate the problem. But it's, progress sometimes isn't as quick as we'd like, but it's a huge project, and it's gonna make a huge difference in our commutes.
Thank you for addressing that, because that's been one question that several people in the town of Abingdon has, it's the backup.
Yeah, and the key is that's a DOT project, we don't control those lights
Yes,
at all.
sir.
Now, the other thing I did wanna mention too, is they have it set up so that if the traffic stacks all the way back, it's like 600 feet up the curve, it will automatically change the adjustment, it'll change the lights, because their goal is to keep the interstate flowing. So if you're, like, whenever the traffic gets back to normal, if you're sitting in that traffic and all of a sudden you're like, man, these lights are screwed up, it's because it's backing up on the on-ramp, or the off-ramp, because they don't want traffic backing up onto the interstate, because that causes issues.
I got you.
So you'll see it on occasion if that happens in traffic, and it's by design, so.
By VDOT's design.
By VDOT's design, yeah, we didn't, we didn't design it, but we do appreciate them doing it for us.
Thank you, Mike Cochran.
Do we have any council member reports?
I do not.
Maybe Monday.
I've got a couple of things from my last tourist. I heard that the tourist, I don't know how to say it, excuse me, tourist meeting that we had. I'm on a committee with that, and I heard that the garden fair was last week, and I heard that that was a big kickoff. I was out of town last week, so I didn't get to attend that, but several people that I've talked to, and I talked to Kim earlier when I first came in today, and Kim said that she had got word that it was one of the best years they said that they had. Was that right, Kim?
Yes, sir.
Up there? I've also got a little flyer for those people who are watching from home. This is about what Mike Cochran was talking about. This is the Fiddlers Convention, and this will be out front, and the Fiddlers Convention is going to be June the 9th and the 10th. That's going to be at the Washington County Fairgrounds. And then we've got a mandolin camp coming to town as well, too, and that's going to be on September the 20th to the 24th. And I think everyone, if you're at home looking, this would be set up in front of the town hall. I think Kim is going to have this on the table out front, so if anyone is seeking to get information on that, stop by the town hall and take a look at the flyers.
And it's a mandolin training camp?
Mandolin training camp, yes, sir.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Everything but banjos.
Exactly.
Come on. Yeah, you gotta respect the banjo, come on.
I don't have anything except for, we're going to, different council members, and I don't know which of you are going to join when, are going to go with our tourism department this coming week to hand out Best of Abingdon awards. So that's always fun. So watch out for that. And I don't know what else. Is the 28th, is that an official ribbon cutting for the splash pad?
2 PM.
2 PM. Are we doing a ribbon cutting for the playground, or is that TBA?
No, that's a little further out.
Okay.
Yeah, this is specifically for the splash pad.
Okay.
What day, Mr. Austin, is going to be the Memorial Day, Veterans Memorial thing at the park? Do you know the actual?
The Saturday before Memorial.
The Saturday before.
Yes.
Okay, all right, all right.
Okay. Do you have anything to report?
I'm good.
Awesome. Okay.
Mayor Pillion.
Yes.
The packet will go out tonight, but it won't be by 5 o'clock, so I will deliver it as soon as it's finished.
Okay, okay, yes, we've got a little bit, we've got these meetings very close together. I'm sure you're working very hard. Okay. In no appointments to boards and committees, and we have already had a lengthy closed session, so we are ready to adjourn. Thank you so much for waiting on us patiently.